You know that feeling, right? When a promise just seems a little too good to be true? A revolutionary gadget, an unbelievable investment return, a shortcut to an amazing future. But when that promise is built on nothing but air, the collapse isn't just big, it becomes the stuff of legend. Today, we're diving into three of the most legendary collapses in history.
Okay. I know it sounds like the setup to a really weird joke, but the answer actually connects three of the most audacious, jaw-dropping scams you've ever heard of. Each one was at the center of a scheme that fooled thousands, made global headlines, and left a trail of absolute ruin in its wake.
So our first story starts with a man who is so infamous, they literally named an entire category of crime after him. Charles Ponzi. Now, to be fair, he didn't actually invent this type of scheme, but oh man, he perfected it. He turned it into an art form, and that's why he's the one we all remember. So what exactly is a Ponzi scheme? Well, think of it as a magic trick. It's all about creating the illusion of profit. You take money from new investors and use that to pay off the early ones. Those early investors get paid, they're thrilled, and they go tell all their friends how much money they're making, and that's the bait, right? It brings in a flood of even more new money. The catch? There's no real business. There's no profit being generated. The whole thing is just a house of cards. And as soon as new money stops coming in, poof, the whole thing collapses. Ponzi's brilliant pitch had nothing to do with Wall Street or real estate. No, it was about something way more boring: postage stamps. He claimed he'd found this genius loophole using something called international reply coupons. See, after World War I, currencies around the world were a total mess, and his big idea was to exploit that chaos. He'd buy these coupons for next to nothing in a country with a weak economy, ship them to the US, and exchange them for American stamps, which were worth way more. Now, this strategy is called arbitrage, and on paper, it's perfectly legal. And that's what was so clever about it. It sounded just complicated enough to be smart, but simple enough for anyone to get the basic idea. And that's a key lesson here. The most effective scams always have a little nugget of a plausible idea at their core. And here was the hook, the part that made everyone's eyes go wide. Ponzi promised an incredible 50% profit in just 45 days. I mean, can you even imagine? To regular people who were used to maybe a few percent a year from a bank, this was intoxicating. It was the dream of getting rich quick, and thousands upon thousands of people poured their life savings into his company. And, of course, here's the twist. The whole postage stamp arbitrage thing, it was just a story. The logistics of actually buying and shipping millions of tiny little paper coupons would have been a complete nightmare and would have eaten up any profit. So Ponzi just didn't bother. Not a single coupon was ever bought. He was just using the new money to pay the old investors. Classic Ponzi. For about a year, the scheme burned incredibly bright. Ponzi was the toast of the town. But then, a newspaper, the Boston Post, started asking some really tough questions. And pretty soon, those whispers of doubt turned into full-blown panic. A massive run started on his company, with everyone scrambling to get their money back all at once. Money that, of course, just wasn't there. When the dust finally settled, the toll was just staggering. $20 million from 1920. That's well over $300 million today. Just vanished. It wiped out tens of thousands of people and even caused 6 banks to fail. Charles Ponzi got his name in the history books, all right, just not in the way he'd planned. And while the details change, the template he perfected was about to show up again, nearly a century later. All right, let's fast forward 100 years. The playbook is the same, but the packaging gets a shiny high-tech upgrade. This time, our charismatic visionary is Elizabeth Holmes, a Stanford dropout who founded a company called Theranos. And her promise wasn't about postage, it was about revolutionizing healthcare itself. And the gap between the pitch and the reality here was just a massive chasm. The pitch was incredible, a sleek little box they called the Edison that could run hundreds of medical tests from a single drop of blood from your finger. It was supposed to change medicine forever. The reality? The technology was a total bust. The machine never worked, and it spit out results that were not just wrong, but dangerously wrong. But that story was so powerful that it fueled this absolutely spectacular rise. Holmes raised hundreds of millions of dollars from some of the smartest investors in the world. She put powerful political figures on her board. She even signed a massive deal with Walgreens. At its peak, Theranos was valued at $9 billion. All of it built on that one compelling, completely false promise.
So, how on earth did they keep the illusion going for so long? Well, they just committed more fraud. When it came time to actually test blood samples from real patients at Walgreens, they obviously couldn't use their machine that didn't work. So they secretly ran the tests on regular, old-fashioned lab equipment they bought from other companies, all while pretending their revolutionary tech was doing all the work. It was an unbelievable deception. But a lie that big can't stay hidden forever. A whistleblower from inside the company finally exposed the whole thing to a reporter at the Wall Street Journal. And after that, the fallout was swift and total. The company imploded, and Elizabeth Holmes was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and sentenced to over 11 years in prison. Now for our final story, we're looking at a different kind of beast. This company didn't need to invent a fake product because it was already a titan of the energy industry. We're talking about Enron. For a while, it was the 7th largest corporation in America. Fortune magazine called it the most innovative company 6 years in a row. They seemed completely unstoppable. And then this happened. The collapse was just breathtakingly fast. The company's stock price went from over $80 a share to less than $1 in just over a year. An entire corporate empire just evaporated. So what happened? Well, Enron's fraud wasn't in a little black box. It was buried deep inside its accounting books. It was complex, but it really came down to two main tricks. One, they used fancy accounting to report huge profits from deals immediately, even if those deals might not actually make any money for years, if ever. Two, they created this complicated web of side companies just to hide billions of dollars in debt. So to the outside world, Enron looked incredibly healthy and profitable. It was all a lie. When the truth finally came out, the result was just catastrophic. And the real tragedy here wasn't just for Wall Street investors. It was for the 20,000 Enron employees. They didn't just lose their jobs, they saw their retirement savings, which were all heavily invested in Enron stock, completely wiped out, almost overnight. So there you have it, a 1920s postage scam, a 21st century tech fraud, and a massive accounting scandal. Three very different stories, right? But when you look closely, they all share some really disturbing common threads. It's almost like they were all following the same playbook. It always starts with a charismatic leader with a really compelling story. Then comes the promise of impossible, revolutionary results. And whenever people ask tough questions, the answer is always, oh, it's a secret formula, or it's proprietary technology. They build up this illusion of success that creates this powerful social proof, this fear of missing out, and it taps right into our deepest desire to believe we've found the next big thing. Ultimately, all three of these cautionary tales bring us right back to this one simple old piece of advice. It's the simplest and yet most powerful defense we have against these kinds of grand deceptions. And that really leaves us with one final big question. We know the warning signs. We've seen these stories play out over and over and over again. So why is that little voice inside us that hopes this time it's real? Why is that voice so incredibly hard to ignore? What is it about us that makes the next grand promise so very, very tempting?